Hello, bonjour, hola, wait, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We can just listen to the sound of the bird song as we let this waterfall of people, 130, and just building and building. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll just take a moment more to let everyone in. Somebody has enabled closed captioning. Yes, if you would like to see a transcript, you can hit more at the bottom of your screen with with the three dots. And you can find captions there and turn those on. So please feel free to do that. Okay, I'll just say goodbye to the birds. So wonderful. So thank you for joining us. I'm Jade. I'm part of the team at the Outdoor Learning Store. We're a North American-wide charitable social enterprise offering outdoor learning equipment and resources for educators and learners and supporting other educational nonprofits as we do it. We work closely with Take Me Outside, who are our partner in delivering this workshop. I'm joining you today from the traditional unceded territories of the Snipes, the bull trout people. It's what's colonially known as Revelstoke in British Columbia. And I live in a place called Skihikan where the ridgelines meet the water. And because land acknowledgements, and I've had a few mentors recently where we're talking about this, where it's not just about people, but it's about place. As we're talking about something about looking closely, one of the things that I'm really enjoying and appreciating about this place at the moment is starting to see the buds on all of the different deciduous trees starting to emerge and looking at their different shape and texture. And so I'm incredibly grateful to live where I am and be a part of that. We know that within Turtle Island and lots of places in the world, it is incredibly important that we honour land, traditional ecological knowledge and Indigenous perspectives whenever we're working with, on or from the land. And so for that, part of our other programming that we're doing is work on truth, the truth of what settlers have done to Indigenous people, and reconciliation. So learning about the culture, the history, and moving forward. And if some of you might already be on this, the first session of 4 seasons of learning, but we're really excited to announce that on May 1st, we'll be opening up another season that really dives a bit deeper. And for any of you who haven't joined up with the first session, you can re-sign up for the first one starting May 1st as well. And so this is online learning, modules, videos brought to you by Reconciliation Education, Rocky Mountain School District 6 and the First Peoples University of Canada. And then there are live virtual gatherings once a month with Indigenous knowledge keepers. And so it's a really beautiful way to dive in. If you do have the knowledge and would like to, in this moment, honour the traditional territory that you're on, you can share in the chat where you're joining us from. And if you don't know whose land you're on, you can visit native-land.ca. It actually covers the entire globe of different Indigenous populations. It's not perfect by their own description, but it's a really good place to start. And for us, land acknowledgements are just the beginning. They are just an opening for acknowledgement, but real relationship building with your local Indigenous, First Nations or native groups is really important if you're working in this field. Over to you, Steph.
Thank you. Yeah, it's lovely to see everyone introducing themselves in the chat. It's a little different now that we're in webinar format, that we can't see everyone's lovely faces, but we know that all 275 of you and counting are so welcome to be here. So thank you. My name's Stephanie. It is my pleasure to be here on behalf of Take Me Outside, where I work, and on behalf of our 70+ outdoor learning partners. And this is the second in the spring series, more to come. And where I'm joining you from is Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And that is Coast Salish territory. It is the unceded land of the Flotsam people. And Haichka, thank you for everyone for joining in and typing all your questions in the chat. And I look forward to the presentation coming up. So I'll pass it back to Jade and we'll get started real quick here.
Thank you, Steph. For those of you just joining us, welcome. And for any of you, we are in Zoom webinars rather than the meeting format that we have been prior. So I'm sorry we can't see your lovely faces, but we have getting larger and larger numbers of people coming. So we want to be sure that we can fit everyone in. So there is a chat box. Please communicate in it, share resources, do all your things. One thing I'd love for you not to do is to put any personal information or emails in that chat box. If you want to reach out, you can reach out to either of Steph or myself using the email that's your Zoom links have been coming from, but we want to keep that chat as something that's really safe for everybody to use. So we can't see you and you are muted, but you can put questions in the Q&A or in the chat box. Steph is being a busy beaver behind the scenes, collecting them all. And so we're going to have a presentation, Q&A session. So we'll collect all those questions and then pose them to Megan and Lauren at the end. And there's always prizes, so stay right to the end for those. You'll get access to a recording, discount code for resources we feature, and a certificate of attendance, and paying attention, I'm sure, in your email following this. It comes the day after. If you don't get it, please check in your spam. It will say your workshop follow-up with all of the information. Okay, I'm really excited because I did see a little bit in the chat that we've got some people coming from a bit further afield. I'm just going to launch a quick poll and I'm going to ask question 1, where are you joining us from? And I know Canada and United States are one continent, but we kind of wanted to split it because we're interested to see, because we started in Canada and now we're splitting out. But it looks like we might have some people coming from around the world. I'm waiting for the day that we get someone from Antarctica. Like, you know, do they have Wi-Fi at the research bases? Who knows? We should ask that question. And then if you scroll down, there's a second question asking, who are you? What kind of educator are you? We think educator is a really broad term for anyone that shares anything. I think we all do it. And it looks like we've got a really diverse group. So I'm going to just give it maybe just 5 more seconds for people to answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm ending the poll. I'm going to share the results. Okay, so largely North American. Someone came from Ghana. You've not put yes in the poll, but we're really excited to see someone from further afield. Thank you so much for joining us. And who do we have? People from every grade of formal education, early childhood, forest. We've got admin, support workers, some informal parents, and some people who aren't even teachers but are just here for the passion of the subject. So that's fantastic. It really is an honor to be a part of a community of people that are so passionate. We've got nearly over 300 people here now joining us after work or whatever you've done with your day, and we appreciate each and every one of you. The work you're doing, the work we're contributing to together is so important, and we are really, really grateful for you for joining us. Okay, I just want to say really quick thanks. We have a lot of partners and supporters that make this work. And if you go to our website, the link's coming in the chat now. Lots of these have really specific resources for you, or resource hubs in the case of Take Me Outside, or things that can really. So these are our international partners. These are our US partners, so maybe some of your affiliates or local groups that you're a part of that also have resources really relevant to your place. These are the first page of our Canadian partners. And a second page. So we're really grateful for each and every one of these people for the work they're doing. But we're really excited to dive in. We're going to be looking closely today at things. We do have a kit in the store that's been curated by Megan that really dives into this and offers the opportunity to look at inquiry, but they're going to talk about it more. And hot off the press, Lauren doesn't even know this, but we have just received Lauren's book, Me and My Sit Spot, which is this beautiful book sharing about how you can get that into the world. So links are going in the chat now, so you can get them from our nonprofit store if you are so inclined. But here we are. We're into the nitty gritty of it. Megan, you know, almost like part of the family now, been here with us since the beginning, but Not only are you here with us, but you are a leading consultant on outdoor teaching and an active outdoor classroom teacher. Lauren is a nature connection mentor, author and educator, and together through their years of experience in hands-on teaching, they're going to share how you can have the most fun learning as you investigate nature. They're going to share about the tools and resources available to take a closer look and investigate using the Looking Closely kit, but also just share about the amazing work they do. And there's some links to their personal websites as well, because that was a really brief bio. These are like top notch peeps, but I'm sure you all know that. And so it's time for me to pass it over and let Lauren and Megan do the talking. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jade. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. I know it's a lot for people to come at the end of a long day, and we don't take for granted your time. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope we make it worth your while to join us live. This kit, today we're going to be talking about the Looking Closely kit that's available for sale through the Outdoor Learning Store. And this was created in response to teachers asking for some simple and easy ways to engage with outdoor learning when maybe they themselves didn't have a lot of experience and weren't sure where to start. So when Lauren and I were sort of storming, how could we help our colleagues? And anyways, we came up with 10 anchor texts, picture books that we love, that really encourage you to slow down and look closely and engage with inquiry practices with your learners outdoors. You want to go to the next slide, Lauren? So this kit was in that photo. You can see that Sarah and I, we are job share partners in the outdoor and garden classroom in our West Coast school. We teach entirely outdoors in all weather, and we firmly believe that everything can be taught in a school garden. And Lauren is going to be here presenting tonight, and I'm going to be kind of in the background tonight. I'm going to let Lauren step up, because the last time we talked about this kit at one of the series for the Outdoor Learning Store, Sarah and I did this together, and now it's Lauren's turn. So Lauren's going to tell you a little bit more about the 10 books that we've selected and some of the activities that she likes to do with her learners. And don't forget that Lauren's book, Me and My Sit Spot's now available on the Outdoor Learning Store. And she's also got her podcast, the Teach Outdoors podcast. At the end of tonight's session, on our last slide, we'll give you all the links and places to find us online on social media, and links to Lauren's podcast and both our websites. But there's just a lot that went into this, and we're really glad you're here today to see and share it with us. So I'm going to pass it off to Lauren. She's going to go through the books and some activities, and then we'll answer your questions. So I'm going to make myself quiet now. Go for it, Lauren.
Well, thank you, Megan. Amazing introduction. I'm almost flustered with sweat. I was not expecting that you would put the book up on the website. So thank you very much. A lovely surprise. As everyone said, I'm Lauren MacLean. I grew up in Richmond, British Columbia, and I'm now out in Port Moody, British Columbia. So I work for SD 43 Coquitlam. I am a full-time teacher. I teach grade 1-2. We are outside every single day. I have more of a forested space where I teach right now. So it's funny when Megan and I chat, it's often I'm telling her like, oh yeah, we had another bear encounter, or, we did a lot of cougar tracking outside today. And so it's very funny to see all the difference of how outdoor learning can look depending on your context. I am the author of Me and My Sit Spot, and yes, I've changed the podcast. You might know it from Mentoring Nature Connections. And it's funny, I had a lot of confusion about what mentoring nature connections meant, because I used to be a mentoring support teacher. And now that I'm back in the classroom, I just sort of wanted to rephrase it so it was really clear. So moving on, I really wanted to begin with why Looking Closely mattered so much. As Megan said, these kits were to help teachers get outside, but why did we start with Looking Closely? Really, it's about slowing down, wondering, observing, and reflecting with our learners. I think the idea of looking closely really helps us and our students appreciate the beauty and the complexity of the natural world, even through this amazing photograph here. And what I often tell my learners is that by observing details and the intricacies there, plants and animals, landscapes, that we can gain a deeper understanding and connection to the environment around us. And I think as we are making connections to the curriculum, we can talk about how important the skill of observation is for scientific research and their understanding. So what scientists do is that they rely on these close observations so that they can understand the natural world. It helps them identify patterns and the relationships. The other side of looking closely is how important it is to our mental health benefits. When we're spending time in nature and we're observing, it has shown, I mean, studies upon studies, Megan's been a part of them, how it reduces stress levels, it improves our mood and our cognitive function. So really, it's at the heart of it, looking closely at nature is a tool that we can use to help understand and appreciate the natural world. Now, play and emergent learning we've put together here. Play, no matter what grade you are teaching, is so important, and it really should be seen as a valid and appreciated form of learning. And I think, especially when I'm looking at my day plan, I'm very intentional about planning in time for play. What spaces are we going to use to play? Because the space, as we said, the context is really going to impact and guide how they're going to play. Now, emergent learning might be a new term. It's an approach that emphasizes the importance of allowing learning to emerge from student interests, what experiences they're engaged in, and their curiosities. So emergent learning, the approach, the curriculum is not predefined. It's not structured. Rather, it's very dynamic, and it's based on the needs and the interests of the students. So emergent learning sort of encourages our learners to direct their own learning. So they get to seek out their knowledge. It helps them achieve their goals. They get to collaborate, and they create meaning together. I think the reason why we believe play and emergent learning is so important is that it really recognizes the individual strengths of every learner. Everybody has different learning styles, their interests are all different, and it supports their development of critical thinking, problem solving, and it really, again, helps them with that confidence because they're directing their own learning. Megan actually had a really good metaphor about the anchor and the boat. Did you want to talk about that a little bit, Megan? I love this metaphor.
I could. It's mostly when I think about the role of the teacher in emergent learning, I think about how whatever jurisdiction you're in right now, whether you're watching the recording or you're here with us live, you have probably some kind of reporting requirement. You'll have some sort of ministerial order or some sort of obligation to report on learning to parents from what's happening in your classroom. And so the role of the teacher when we think about emergent learning is really thinking about what is it that I have to report on, and then watching how children are engaging with the natural world, and then sort of mapping on that curricular vocabulary or learning that we have to teach, and making that visible to the stakeholders around us. And when the boat and the anchor, what I was explaining to Lauren about how sometimes what's hard for people when they haven't heard that phrase before, what you really want to make sure you have is a strong, solid understanding of what you are required to teach in the jurisdiction in which you're teaching, so that you can anchor that play to the curricular learning that exists where you are. It's not unintentional, I guess, is what's really important about this. You want to be intentional about connecting what you're seeing through play to the curricular competencies and big ideas in your curriculum, so that your learners have something to anchor the learning to that they're encountering. It doesn't have to be, when we think about play and emergent learning, there is a whole space for unstructured play in this, and undirected, non-connected play to learning, but it's really hard to separate play and learning in childhood. And so the role of the teacher is to make that visible through your different reporting strategies. And that's more than we're going to get to today. But we just wanted to make sure everybody knew what we were talking about when we talk about emergent learning.
Yeah, perfect. Because really what we're going to be talking about now is highlighting the books that we use, and then how we get into play inspired by that book and what we've noticed from that play, how we push the learning forward, or help sort of frame it and guide it along there.
Okay, so Lauren's going to start showing you some examples. I'm going
All
to
right,
mute
here we
myself
go.
again.
So book number 1, I guess. This is an absolutely gorgeous book called Sidewalk Flowers, written by John Arno Lawson. And it's a black and white book about a young girl who's walking through the city with a father who's very distracted on his phone. And she starts noticing beautiful flowers in pretty unusual places. And she starts collecting them on her journey. And then as the journey progresses through the story, she starts noticing more and more color. So it starts with very much black and white, a little more color as it goes along. Now, after I read that story to my grade 1 and 2s, definitely my students were very inspired by this idea of noticing one color at a time. They loved how the character wasn't distracted by everything all at the same time, because that is often how we are. The character really slows down and she took her time. So I have a bunch of paint swatches, as you can see in the picture above there. I just collected them from hardware stores, painting stores. Some have a range of colors all in one. Some of my paint chips are just one color. So there's a whole variety that I have. I would hand them out to the learners and they went off and did a little matching game. So after they were done collecting a few samples, then they would come back and trade for a new color swatch. So again, I have a big pile. So it was just a nice, simple rotation of everybody going to search and focus at one beautiful color at a time and trying to figure out what the gifts are of those colors. So again, as we were talking about with emergent learning, as the educator, I'm standing still, I'm sort of observing everybody and then trying to guide their learning along through some prompting questions. So I might ask them with that leaf that they found on the ground, it wasn't picked off of the tree, they did find it on the ground. And so I asked them, what color could you name that? Or how do those colors make you feel? As they're exploring a bit more and making comparisons with their classmates, we can now ask them how these colors are connected to our memories and maybe our emotions in this space that we're exploring in. For instance, there was another learner who found a connection to one of the salal leaves that we have up here on the mountain, which are nice oblong shaped leaves and very much colored right now because it's spring, like lime green, beautiful color. And so we were making connections to that color of lime green with making salads at home. So again, this wonderful connection between color and memories. Now, after we had completed that activity, we always meet up in circle outdoors to debrief our experiences, ask questions, and connect with everybody, and then make plans for the next day. So as we were in circle, we were trying to prompt them to sort of dig a bit more about what learning dispositions they were getting nurtured. Now, learning dispositions is something that we always support as educators. Now, where I am in British Columbia, we call these core competencies, but as Megan and I were talking, they are worldwide learning attitudes and habits of mind toward learning. So it includes, or learning dispositions really includes how they learn new information and how students are willing to take risks or seek out challenges and persevere through tasks. We're always developing and nurturing these dispositions, and it's these learning attitudes that help them have a really strong, healthy attitude towards education, towards their overall development as a person. So for example, how did this activity of paint swatches help us get new ideas when we explore with our sense of sight? What other senses were we using? How is this activity helping us get to know the land a little better? Because this is really helping us slow down, just like the book said, noticing one color at a time. And is it helping us see nature any differently? So the next book is Step Gently Out by Helen Frost. And it's a gorgeous photo album type of book. It has very simple, poetic language, describing what these little tiny creatures are seeing and experiencing in the world. It's a really beautiful book about perspective taking. So this book really inspired us to go outside and take out our magnifying glasses. We found a quiet spot to sit and try to find and observe tiny creatures like the ones we saw in the book. Now, 3 key things that this activity definitely required that we had to talk about and model a lot with our class is patience. We're not going to find the little insects right away. Observation skills. What does that look like? What does it not look like? And respect. So if I were to see an insect, how am I going to react? Do I squish it? Do I trap it in a corner? There's a lot of front loading to this activity before we got started. Then we got into partners. We shared out our observations of the insects and bugs that we were able to find, the questions that we had, and then we handed out some clipboards and paper so that we could do some observational sketches. And again, imagine I've got 20 students all sitting around in the forest, they're drawing, and I'm wandering around and then asking them questions such as, I wonder how that insect, especially in the picture of the book, how is that insect balancing on the leaf? What is the shape of their legs and bodies that allows them to move that way? And I think it's these type of questions that really help guide their observations and help them think a bit more critically. After they were done doing their observational sketches, we started adding words to describe our illustrations in the form of a poem. So these poems were written from the perspective of an insect who does not want to be stepped on. They just really want to enjoy life around them. So some of the examples, and I have them written here, that the pillbug, small, round, curling up scared, and stretching long to walk. So that's by a grade 2 student. The next example I have of the poem is Black Ant, crawling, stopping, crawling more. So really simple but beautiful, using lots of vocabulary to describe what they see. Now again, at the end of our activity, we met in circle to debrief and share out our experiences. So we were talking about how today's activity really helped us develop social awareness and responsibility. So that was our learning disposition. Why is it important to be aware of ourselves and our surroundings? How do our actions impact others? Have we ever considered the perspective of the ant as we're walking in the forest? I wonder if tomorrow we're going to be a little more cognizant of where we're walking. Are we going to stay on the trail? Are we going to explore off after they've had these experiences? Now, some students really never considered that smaller insects could get hurt as we were walking through the forest. So I did notice that our first circle round after this activity was one of the quietest that we had ever had because they were so deep in thought. But by the second round of our circle, the students were a lot more verbal, making connections, and were able to find the words to express themselves. But it was very interesting. I could tell, again, knowing your learners, how quiet they were because they were so deep in thought. All right, the next book is called What John Marco Saw, written by Annie Barrows. And it's about this young boy who's modeling how to slow down and notice small things to all the busy adults in his life. He's trying to share his observations with his parents, but they're just a bit too busy to pay attention. Now, sadly, a lot of my students made connections with this story. So they really did feel that they discover things and they're trying to tell friends, adults around them, but they're just too busy to listen. So we went outside and we got into partners and we played I Spy just to warm up. So this was really our way to practice listening and responding, but also using really specific vocabulary to describe the things that we were seeing. After they had that warm-up activity, the picture there is one of my scarves. So I had hidden about 4 items in the scarf. And I told them, okay, in a second, I'm going to open up the scarf. You're going to have 5 seconds to take a look, and then I'm going to close the scarf again. So I opened up the scarf, everybody's looking, close the scarf, and now it's their opportunity to go look and find and match some of the loose items. So again, we're not picking the items. It's all things that can be found on the forest floor, and then bring them back. Now, once they found their items, we added a layer of describing what we found. So again, as many words as they can find. One of the items that I had hiding in the scarf was a Douglas fir cone. So mine had a bunch of chewed up parts. So we had to say Douglas fir cone with a chewed up section. It's really flaky and only a few seeds were left in it. Half wet, half dry. So it's not just a cone. Again, we're really helping scaffold how they can describe the items that are around them. After I modeled that game, again, we got into small partners. I handed out the scarves and they started playing with one another. So it's nice that these activities can keep building and building and they get more repetition. It was really interesting noticing how they were communicating with one another during this activity. And so again, when we finished the game, we met in circle and I asked everyone, was it easier to be the one in I Spy to give the clues or to listen to the clues? And we had a really interesting balance. Most people preferred to be the one to listen, not to be the one to communicate. So we talked a lot in circle about this relationship and connection between speaking and listening, and why in some situations it's easier to be the speaker and how sometimes it's easier to be the listener. It really, for them, it came down to if they felt pressured or not, like they had to speak right now, or did they feel more comfortable just sitting back and listening, because it was still a form of participation and engagement. It just looked a little differently. Okay, Tiny Perfect Things is by M.H. Clark, and it's really about childhood explorations and how curiosity can transform an ordinary day into this magical world of wonder. The book really inspired our class to go investigate tiny, small things. So we went outside, we looked for nooks and crannies to see what we could discover. Who or what might want to live in these small crannies? And this activity took off more than I had anticipated. We had a very interesting energy of a lot of excitement and then a lot of really careful, quiet collecting time. So we naturally started doing lots of story workshop activities, collecting items, telling stories, bringing in a friend, retelling the story. It went on for days on end. The picture on the left-hand side there with the stick and the little acorn top, that was a very detailed story between two boys about fairies and making magical potions. And then on the right-hand side, that picture was a story about robins in their nest with their eggs. And then there was this hidden life of some smaller insects who wanted to live in the nest with them. And the bird and the eggs and the insects were trying to develop a relationship or a friendship. And it was a very comical story of lots of failure moments, they called them. Now, because this theme or this activity lasted for days, we had a lot of opportunities to explore the same stories in the same space with the same materials. And I think the familiarity was really the key to the depth of their storytelling. So when I was listening to their stories during circle time, I often asked, how did your relationship with that object, like the acorn top, change the way you see it? Did you always love the acorn tops? Do you see them differently now that they've been a main part of your story? And it was really interesting how they found items that they just found were using in their story because there was a lot of them. There was an abundance and they never really considered them before, but because they were such an integral part of their story, they felt very protective over those found loose part materials for a couple weeks afterwards, because it really was a huge part of their emotions and the connections to their story. Now, again, in circle time, we were making this connection with personal awareness and responsibility, and how it was interesting that storytelling was really us seeking out experiences that make us happy. We were not telling stories that made us feel uncomfortable or scared or unhappy. I wanted to go collect items to make a bird nest because for me, I love birds. So that is something that as an adult, I know what I like and what I don't like. So those are the activities that I seek out. And I think at a young age, it's really important for them to know what they like and what they don't, and sort of let that guide their play. Here we go. Treasure is another beautiful book by Muriel Messier, and it's about siblings who go on a scavenger hunt. But as siblings do, as a lot of friendships do, they disagree about what makes a treasure a treasure. So I think the younger sibling found a feather, was amazed by it, tried to share it with her older sister, who wasn't very impressed. This led to a very interesting conversation with our learners about difference of opinion. What someone thinks is precious may not be precious to someone else. And we really wanted to take that idea outdoors to get to know our land a bit better. So we ended up going on a treasure and trash nature walk. So how we started is we made 2 circles. Every learner made 2 circles out of sticks and some leaves that they found on the ground. One for trash, one for treasure. Excuse me. Then off they went and they found some loose materials and again sorted them into their 2 piles, but then had to explain to a friend why it belonged there. So it's a really interesting way to, again, get them to consider, well, this is how I feel. And now I'm going to not defend it, but I'm going to explain why I feel this way with a partner. And then it was almost like a gallery walk. So I got to stand by my 2 circles, and then classmate after classmate came and asked me, and we had a really polite conversation about, well, this is why I like this, but this is why I don't really like that pine cone. And then I got a turn to go visit my classmates' trash and treasure collection. Some of the student reflections about how to effectively and politely cooperate with others, because that's one of our learning dispositions, is this idea of being able to collaborate, that we are allowed to disagree on what is trash and treasure, but we have to do it in a respectful way. So how do I contribute to this group activity? I'm not going to go and visit a friend's circle and say, wow, you put that rock into your treasure. It's not a very nice rock, because that can really be quite hurtful to a learner. So what are ways, and we would have very open conversations about this, how do we begin a sentence to have respectful disagreements? I see that you like that rock. I wonder if, or maybe I would also prefer a rock that looked like this, because then I'm not negating what you're saying, but I'm just trying to admit what I like or how it's a bit different. Here we go. Finding Wild was written by Megan Wagner-Lloyd. It's a wonderful book about 2 kids going on an exploration in their urban neighborhood. So a really wonderful book if you're in a more urban area, because often a lot of nature books are for being out in the forest, down by the river, out in the garden, but many schools are in urban areas. These 2 kids, as they're exploring, they discover simple things like bark or the storm clouds. And it's those discoveries where they realize that wild really can be anything and anywhere. So this idea of going on an adventure, finding things, discovering what they're called, is what inspired our next activity. We went on a wild nature walk. So I handed out these calendar numbers. So it's something that you can pick up at really any teacher store. I have them in a bunch of different type of feet because I love doing tracking and I love doing math connections outdoors. So these ones are numbers from 1 to 31 for the calendar. I have them in dogs. You can get them in dinosaurs, bird tracks. Sky's the limit if you Google them. And every learner got a bunch of different calendar numbers. And so as they walked around together and we found something that they wanted to identify, we would place down one of the numbers. We would map it because everybody had a clipboard with some paper. We would map it, we would sketch it, draw it in our nature journals. And then if they had time and they felt inclined to, I would hand out some field guides so that they could try to identify it in the field guide. Now, again, similar to one of the last activities, this activity took off and we did it almost every single day for about 6 days. It was something that they didn't want to stop. They wanted to keep identifying and keep using their calendar markers to go look for different wild things. It was extremely motivating. So again, as we repeated this wild nature walk, we began to tell stories at every stop. So there's something wild, there's my calendar number, I'm going to draw it. And actually now I'm going to tell a story about these pine needles there in the picture there. Remember that one time we did the story workshop about the bird's nests, and then the insects were trying to make friends with the different eggs. And so then now they are connecting story to place to these numbers on our map. So it was a really wonderful intersection of everything sort of coming to fruition at the same time. Now, again, at Circle, our circles look different every day during this activity, but some of the questions that I wrote down were, what stories live in our wild spaces? So we do our nature walk, our numbers, reflect on the stories that live there. And then we asked how we might interact respectfully in those spaces. So where there's an area with a lot of mud here by the pine needles, it was a bit of an area of erosion as well. Well, what's the story of that erosion? Did it always look this way? Are we having a negative impact on it? Do you think maybe we should stick to the trail side a bit more often? That's sort of where we were trying to guide the conversation. But it was a really, again, a great eye opener for them to see, well, yeah, I know it's a wild space, but I still need to respect that space, not run physically wild in that area. So again, that learning disposition of that critical thinking, how we can explore and investigate on our wild nature walk with a purpose and a goal in mind. Okay, this next book is called Listen by Holly McGee, and it has a beautiful theme about connectedness and the relationship that we can have with the earth. The words in this book are so fluid and poetic, which is definitely one of the reasons that our students loved it so much. It felt and it told like a lullaby. It was really, it was about all of our senses that we can use, but how important it is to really follow our heart. What are we interested in and passionate in, and slow down. So this is exactly what our learners asked to do. They wanted to go outdoors and try to block out one of their senses, just like the main character did. So at the top, the first picture there, we blocked out our eyesight first. Now, not everybody used a blindfold. That was a choice if you felt comfortable to. But again, if you're blocking out a sense like that, then we talked about you needed a partner to hold your arm or your elbow as you're walking, just for safety reasons. Most of our learners decided just to close their eyes because they felt safer that way. So as you can see, he's got his sight is closed and he is really getting to know that tree really well. So that's sort of what we ended up calling the activity, is get to know your tree. So he was going all over, again, just using this, the sense of touch to get to know it. And then afterwards, he removed the blindfold, took a few steps, and then tried to look back and see, I wonder which tree that was that I was feeling. I think it was this one because of all the different type of ridges. After we did that, we decided on which sense we wanted to block out next. And so they decided on hearing. So we went back into the school, grabbed all of our headphones, came back outdoors, and we did basically the same activity, blocked out a sense with our headphones, sat with our clipboards and our paper, and we just drew what we noticed, not what we were listening to. Then we tried to do a bit of a comparison about our experiences of blocking out our sense of sight versus when we blocked out our sense of hearing. Which one was easier Which one was more complicated? Did any of those experiences make you feel uncomfortable? I wonder why. And again, all of these prompts and questions were shared out during Circle. So what did it feel like when you just focused on listening? How did it change your perspective? And then again, flip that to when we were doing touch. When you just focused on touch, was it different than if you could touch and look at the same time? In terms of the learning disposition, when we're doing activities like this, again, it's still really highlighting and supporting the idea of social awareness and responsibility, that people are different than ourselves. I'm noticing a certain thing about my sense of touch or my sense of hearing, and that's okay. It's different than my friends. Again, there's no judgments. If you couldn't find the tree after you were playing the game, it was just all about explorations and learning how to slow down and sort of take it one step at a time. Again, it's all the inspiration from the book with the illustrations were absolutely incredible. We actually redid it again this morning. It was a lot of fun. This next book is called Small Wonders by Matthew Clark Smith. And it's a true story about the naturalist Jean-Henri Fabre. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. He studied insects in their natural habitat. And the text and the illustrations in this book were so engaging for our students. So, I mean, so much so that we ended up making indoors an incredibly long list of wonder questions about what insects live near us, how big might they be, what do they like to eat, an incredible list. And then we went outside to try to look for them. We spent a very long time trying to find the different bugs in our forest, investigating their natural habitat. A lot of interesting discussion about, is this where they live, or are they just visiting? Are they moving back and forth between point A and point B? And how long do we have to sit here and watch before we would actually know the answer to that? Now, after we had that little observation time, we again came into Circle and we talked about all the different ways that we might be able to make bug homes or hotels for the insects that live in our forest. And actually, I know I just have a picture of that one example of a little bug home, but it ended up becoming a huge bug community that was built up in our entire forested section of one of our outdoor classroom areas. They used these loose parts, they made pathways, they made little pretend stop signs, so it literally had a roadway. It was incredible. And fun was endless. After we met in Circle, we really continued to dive more into these wonder questions about insects. Where do they live? How do they support our environment? Can we figure that out by just observing them, or did we need to go take out a few more books from the library? We wondered, our last question that we're hoping to dig in a bit more next week was about how we can impact positively and negatively the insects that live here. Because of the nature of this activity, it was really our collaboration skills that were put into good use, because it ended up being really a community, not just I'm working on my own bug home here. It was every single learner in my classroom that was working together and had to map it out and negotiate, compromise. And so we discussed, was it difficult? Was it easy to work respectfully and safely in this small little shared space of ours? So, we had a lot of interesting discussions about, well, I really wanted to build mine there. So we had to ended up making it an apartment building because they didn't want to be too crowded standing side by side their homes. So they ended up having to do 2 stories. Going back and forth. Did you need a teacher to help you make that? No, they were actually able to make those compromises all by themselves, but we were outside for about 2 hours doing this activity. So they had long enough to do those negotiations independently. All right. Flotsam is by David Weisner, and it's a wordless picture book about a boy who finds a discarded camera on the beach, which as he goes into the pictures of the camera, sort of leads him into this visual journey of the underwater life. The illustrations are incredibly captivating. So much so that we ended up displaying it on our big classroom TV to get a closer look. Then I grabbed a few extra copies because I knew a bunch of teachers at my school also had their own copy. So we got into small groups and they got to explore a bit closely. They started playing I Spy with the book. Can you see this? Where can you find this? Tons of games, tons of laughter, so highly engaging. And then we headed outdoors to do the same activity outside as the picture was trying to inspire us to do. So we collected, found materials, we created a nature scene, and then we had to find a partner to try to play a scavenger hunt. So there's my nature scene. I tried to make a bit of a maze. And now I'm going to ask, can you find the ant in my story? And so it wasn't an actual ant. They tried to just draw it in the forest floor there. But it was very much organized in the same way that we did the treasure and trash walk, where we did a gallery walk between everybody's nature scene. So again, a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication about how we can share our ideas with our friends. Again, during circle time, after they shared and did their gallery walk, we asked, how does your story change? How does it become richer when we look and listen closely to all the details of your story? Because I know it's very easy to discard wordless picture books because it seems so simplistic. Well, I think that's actually the power of looking closely and slowing down, is that we can look at this book, and we have, because we now have 4 copies in our classroom, is that we can look at it and find new things every single time. So it gets deeper and deeper and deeper every time we look at it again. Now, those were my words. The student words, when I asked them about how their stories get richer when they tell it again, some of the responses that I wrote down from their circle time was that my story was so much more exciting than it might have looked at first. And another grade 2 girl said that my story got more details every time someone came to visit. And so again, that awareness that the more I tell a story, the richer it's going to be, has such wonderful connections to their literacy development. All right, and this is my last book. It's called Puddle, and it's written by Richard Jackson, and it was a perfect book to reread today because we had rain today in Port Moody, we had hail, we had snow, we had sunshine, and then back to rain. So it was quite comical that we read this story again today. And it is written from the perspective of a puddle, which is a really fun twist. What does the puddle experience and how does it feel about itself? Now, many of our learners had never considered how the world could look from the perspective of a puddle, which led to quite a comical discussion about other type of attributes that puddles could have that we have. They're flexible, they like to get dirty. And then our conversation then switched to being a bit more about comfort levels when it comes to the rain. Not everybody in our classroom likes it, and we go outside every single day and have since September. And that's okay. We all have different comfort levels. So we're sitting inside, we read the book, and we drew a picture about what activities we do like to do in the rain. What could we do in the rain? So everybody's drawing, imagining themselves being outdoors. Then we get dressed. We've already gotten ourselves mentally prepared to be outside. We go outside, and I hand everybody some sidewalk chalk. So step number 1, can everybody go outline the puddles? We got into little groups. We set a timer to 5 minutes, drew our pictures of the shape of the puddle. Timer goes off, check the puddle. Has it changed? Get out our rulers, measure the width, measure the length, measure the depth. We recorded all this information on our notebooks. I mean, if you can visualize it, we step out into the rain, do our work, and then there's a small little overhang, and that's where we kept our clipboards so they could stay dry-ish. And then again, set the timer again for another 5 minutes, did another outline to double check in a different colored chalk. Now, once that was done, again, because we had so much fun with talking about shape of puddles and how the shape was changing as more rain was falling, I went inside and I grabbed some blue construction paper, cut it out in some really funny shapes, handed them out to partners, and they had to go find their puddle twin. So again, look at the different shapes of your construction paper and then go match. This learner ended up dropping the paper into the water, so it didn't last very long for their group. Most of them were able to just sort of hold and estimate. Again, a lot of really great math connections there. And it was so much fun, and especially because we called it Puddle Twin activity. It was really engaging. Again, we went as a group for our circle time after we were done measuring and finding our puddle twin. And we were talking about how this activity, again, was really supporting the idea of collaboration, how we had to share roles and responsibilities. Who was the timer? Who was the measurer? Who recorded all the information in the clipboard? Did we have any issues with having groups of 3? What could we have done better next time in terms of giving positive feedback to our friends instead of yelling at them? Maybe we could have spoken to them a bit more kinder. And again, it was a really great way to talk about working together for a common goal. It was the perfect day for it. All right, Megan, let's just before 5, hopefully that timing was okay. I'm not sure how the chat was going, but
Lots of great compliments. That was so good, Lauren.
Oh.
Yeah, it was so good. So if anyone is looking to connect with us, these are the places where you can find Lauren and I in all the corners of the internet. Yeah, so many questions, and I apologize. I was like trying to diligently answer questions, and it turned out I was just sending it to panelists, not to everybody. So yeah,
Oh, no.
apologies. That's okay. There's lots of questions coming in. Ellen, I see your question about meeting requirements of the state. We're in Canada. We have a totally different education system. I'm afraid that's beyond what we can get to in tonight's Q&A around how to work around those requirements. Potentially you could send us an email through our websites and we can engage with you that way. There's lots of questions about assessing and documenting learning. Jade, that might be another webinar that we do later. And I like Connie's question. How is emergent learning different than inquiry learning? Connie, my fast answer to that, because I'm keeping an eye on the time, is that emergent learning is like opening the door to the spirals of inquiry. Like emergent learning is the spark and inquiry is the follow-up, the cycling and the reflecting and the returning to learning over time. So yeah, emergent learning is the spark that leads to a practice of inquiry. Next question that I'm seeing, lots of good comments about the book, different group sizes for different group ages. Well, we're public school teachers, so we get what we get. If we've got a class of some classes I work with have 28 students and some of our kindergarten classes have 22. So we work with the groups that we have. We don't get to determine those sizes. People are asking about the appropriateness of the age of the groups. I would say that everything Lauren's talked about is for everybody. Like Lauren, you did such a beautiful job of describing how you go through your process. And those of you who are watching this recording or listening live can personalize that to your group of learners 100%. It's for everybody, literally everybody. It was so great. Jade, is there anything that's sticking out for you that you're feeling like we haven't answered?
There was one thing about talking to students about leaving nature in nature and not collecting living things when one of the character collects things in the book. So I wonder how.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I can talk about what we do in the forest and then maybe you could tell us, Megan, about how it works in your context. So we definitely have a no picking rule, almost like hard stop, unless we are intentionally going out to forage something. For instance, we were making rose hip tea back in the fall. And so we talked about what we needed to collect. We went outside. We asked for permission. We only took as much as we needed. We measured it outdoors and brought it inside. So we left a lot. We didn't take all the rose hips off of the bush. We left lots behind. When we were reading that book, actually, one of my grade 1 students did make a comment that, she was hurting nature by picking nature's hair. So we often talk about how grass is nature's hair. We don't want to pick it. I don't love people picking out my hair. But, she was in her learning process. So just as what we would say to one of my students, if they picked a flower, I wouldn't yell at them because yikes. I would just say, oops, remember, and we would gently remind our learners about our expectations, but we would never get angry at our friends for making a mistake. We just try to model it as best we can, but we definitely leave stuff in the forest. Even after we've made a story out of our found materials, we clean it up. There's some trails near us. We talk about safety. I'm a mountain biker. If I'm coming down a trail on my bike, I don't want to be coming down and smashing somebody's story workshop. That's dangerous to me. I could fall off my bike. If there are moms pushing strollers, or we've got a couple learners in our buddy class that are in wheelchairs, it's a safety thing. It's a respect thing. We clear it away, put everything back once we're done. So yeah, Megan, what do you do?
Yeah, similar. I would say that it's the same sort of ethic around where it's not nature, like really helping children reframe their perspective around the world is not here for their consumption, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we have to be thoughtful and intentional in how we harvest, concepts of reciprocity, particularly in my work in the school garden, that we're not just harming plants. Sometimes plants want to be harvested from, but there's an ethic to that and a protocol for that. So we work around those concepts as well. The only other piece that I really wanted to address that I saw in the chat was around ticks. I would say ticks are considered a hazard when we're teaching outdoors, and you need to be aware of it, but that doesn't mean you need to not take kids outside. It just means you need to acknowledge that they are a present hazard in your school community, and you need to work with education and mitigate the hazard through education and prevention techniques. And so teaching children, to wear long pants, to tuck their pants into their socks if you're going to be in long grasses, how to check for ticks with each other, and just making sure that families are aware that there are ticks in your community and how to remove those. Most of our school communities now have this problem, and we just have to learn. It's like communities that have really hot climates. We have to have shade protocols, and we're on the west coast of Canada and it rains like 978 days a year here. So, we don't go outside, because if you never went outside when it was raining, we'd never go outside. So we have lots of ways to deal with rain. So these are all just ways that we, we manage to be outside, and everything is doable with patience and time. You just have to sort of want to do it, and you work around those issues. Mm-hmm. The last thing I was going to say, lots of people are talking about, like, where do we get the books? So just like as a final reminder, these books are available with the teacher's guide in a bundle from the Outdoor Learning Store. That's all there. So if you want those, you can access them. Jade can maybe drop another link in the chat. Their staff has put one in. Yeah, there it is.
Beautiful.
Lots of others, like, people loved your session, Lauren. I know you've Lauren shut the chat because it can be very overwhelming.
I did, sorry.
It's important to focus.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. That was so beautiful. Really, I could see people just, yes, great idea. I'm going to use that. That's so helpful. So thank you so much. Here's what I'm going to do, because we are over the hour, sorry, wherever you are, just because there's so much information. People love it. Thanks so much. I'm going to do a soft close, do our little quiz for prizes, and then if you could maybe stick around for another 5 or 10 minutes, we'll try and get to a couple of those questions that if they haven't been answered yet. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. We do have more coming up in the workshop series, nature activities for year-round learning. We've got Oceans Day, we've got understanding race and nature for educators, nature journaling, Indigenous two-eyed seeing, and animating outdoor learning using finger puppets. So sign up for all of them. We hope there's something there for everyone. And prizes, here we go. Everyone get your typing fingers and your search bars open. It might help you to have the Outdoor Learning Store website and the Take Me Outside website open as we go into the quiz here. because we're trying to get you guys to really know what we're about rather than just like, here's our stuff. So here's what you can see. So question 1 here. So we've got two $25 gift cards to the Outdoor Learning Store for questions 1 and 2, and then two $25 gift cards to the Take Me Outside store. Again, we're both nonprofits. We're all about ethical policies and practices. So here we go. Question 1. If you go on the Outdoor Learning Store website, how many different outdoor learning kits or packs do we have? There's a search bar at the top. You can kind of hover over and have a little peek. Steph's looking at the chat there.
I am. I haven't seen the right answer.
Of random numbers coming up.
Yeah. You've got to have a look. You've got to have a look, see. And these kits and learning packs are curated by experts with all of the resources that we have, you know, spent time thinking about and hoping that will suit and really support you in your outdoor education as a leader. Did you find it yet?
I haven't seen anyone answer it correctly yet.
Okay, go to the outdoorslearningstore.com. And if you hover
someone said
over
it's
browse shop, there's one type called kits and packs.
We got it. Someone said
We're
it was
saying
loaded.
the website's crashed.
We crashed the website. Sorry.
Oh, no.
But Lisa Domler, you got the right answer. It's 11. So there was a lot of really, really close answers, but so the answer is 11. Lisa, message me with your email and then we'll get in touch. And for these first 2 prizes at the Outdoor Learning Store, let us know whether you would prefer Canadian or American dollars for that. And then for the other 2, the TMO gift cards, it's not relevant. So there we go.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, the website is down. So that's stressful, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to update the second question because I still can't get in myself. I do deeply apologize. So, you know, you live and you learn. We're all learning together. Question 2 then. What is the title of Lauren's book? Oh my gosh. It was so fast in there.
Amazing. Yeah. The first one up on my screen there is Anka.
It's your rescue?
Yeah. Congrats.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Congratulations.
Send me your email and your preference for Canadian or American dollars.
Okay, beautiful. Question 3. This is Take Me Outside gift cards. Let's see how this goes. What is the strap line for Take Me Outside for the Take Me Outside for Learning Challenge, and a slogan that you can find on some of their t-shirts? It's a very sort of specific thing. Something, 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 something.
That's a great hint. There's some, oh, nice. There it is. Heather McKinnon. Not all classrooms have 4 walls. Yes, amazing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Send your email to Steph there.
Thank you.
Okay.
There was some other ask your teacher to take you outside is on some of our other shirts, to be fair.
Nice job. Okay, question 4. Final question for prizes today. Which sport or activity does Colin, Take Me Outside's founder, complete a mammoth cross-country adventure doing in his book Take Me Outside, which inspired him to actually create the organization Take Me Outside? Which sport?
Elizabeth Colette, maybe you read the book, who knows, but you were right on it with running. That's correct.
You can get it at the Take Me Outside website. It's a really beautiful, inspiring book about getting kids outside and what kind of is the impetus for all this work. Thank you so much, Lisa Marie Labossiere Taylor. We're going to check into what you said in the chat, and I'm sure we'll figure something out for you. Just send your email to Steph too, please. Okay, thank you so much. Again, recording, certificate of attendance, resources, all coming to you in your follow-up email. If you haven't got it by lunchtime tomorrow, it's in your spam. Go there, find it, and all of the resources will be yours. Okay, I'm going to go back to some questions because my goodness. Do you know if any of those books are in French, Lauren or Megan?
Yeah, we didn't include them, but typically if you go on and I hate to promote Amazon, but if you look on any of those sites, they might have a French version there. Yeah. I don't know. We don't carry the.
Or if you send enough emails, maybe we'll get them in French for you. I do understand it is so hard for our Francophone friends. Yeah, and actually, we're looking at the next workshop series of doing a whole workshop specifically about French resources. So
Julie's saying that Treasure is definitely available in French. Yeah.
Okay. Super.
And I know
Thanks.
my book I had translated in French as well.
Excellent. Me and my sit spot. Get it en français. Okay, some questions. Okay, Atlas asks, how can I engage learners with minimal resources and limited access to outdoor surroundings? I live in a city. We only have access to a fenced-in playground with no grass or trees. Where do we go?
Start with finding wild.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, and particularly in urban spaces. I do work with a lot of teachers that work in really like super urban schools. In the research, it's often called a leftover space in the schoolyard. So those areas like under stairwells, those areas around fences, those areas often will have weeds and sort of unmowed, untended areas. And those are the wild spaces in our schoolyards. And that's where that first connection to nature can happen. And then once you've established some core routines around how you're going to move as a group, you can go out into your community and start looking for wild in other spaces. Start small, start with what you have, and then build from there is my short answer to that question.
Beautiful. I'm going to keep rolling because there's 1,000 questions. So I'll come to you, Laura, next.
Q&A.
Yeah. Fernanda is asking, how do you document learning experiences? And then there was another question that I can type into this about using clipboards in the rain, or like, do you do assessment in a different way if it's raining? I've used a plastic bag over a clipboard, like they're in their own little tent. But any thoughts, Lauren? Assessments.
I do love myself a clipboard. So I'm a huge clipboard person. I have blank paper. I have student lists with squares for every learner. I usually, again, if I have my class list on my paper, I usually have my like guiding ideas. If I'm going to be doing estimation, then I can write my notes, how they're estimating outdoors here. And then I'll have something about patterns here. And if I've noticed that there is waterproof paper. It's extremely expensive, so I'm not a big fan myself. I put it under my jacket and I take my notes and I just leave it in my jacket as we walk along. Or I just take a few photos and I document when I get back inside, because I'll scan the photo up onto my, not the computer, onto the TV, and then we can do another reflection indoors. And then I just type my notes from there.
Nice. And I know for some people, if you've got students who are too young to do their own sort of writing for assessment, go back into the classroom and create you have like a big piece of paper and they sort of contribute and you write down for them, right? Let's dive into slightly older. So we started here really for elementary students, and I know that's where you're mostly teaching, but do you have any concept of how this could be scaled up for middle or high school, sort of this inquiry-based learning? Do you think it can?
Well, most of my activities were done with our middle school buddies, so grade 8s. So I didn't give a lot, like all my quotes that I talked about, they were all my kiddos, mostly because I don't know all of the older kids' names, and so I can't write them down fast enough. But every activity, I think minus one that I shared today, were all done with our big buddies. So that's always nice. I know Megan works with a wide range of ages.
Yeah, I think conceptually, as educators, you are taking those concepts and then scaffolding on them to meet the needs of your learners. So it's hard for us to say you should do this with 14-year-olds. Some of those 14-year-olds are going to need to start at the beginning, where we're just talking about, really simple concepts. And so then you build and scaffold and they might get there faster. But yeah, I think be done with everybody, even adult learners at the university.
Right. And if you start like a nature journaling practice, for example, where using that as an assessment, collecting metadata, it can just get more and more complex as you get older. I like to start with some of these kids' books, like for older students, it's just as a spark, and we read it and just start a discussion based on that, and then you can go out and scale it up for the sort of more complex ideas that they are able to relate to. Okay, Louise asked about activities with pebbles on a beach or river. Have you ever done anything with that? I know I have, because we have a lot of them here.
There's lots of great books about rocks, and everybody needs a rock, and if you have a rock, and so some great anchor texts that you can use to start beginning that. There's lots of land art that you can be doing with stones and pebbles in terms of making and representing, mandalas and shapes and patterns. Yeah, that's probably a whole other session. Just
Oh
on
yeah, a whole
stones
workshop.
and
I just
earth
love doing-
materials.
Yes, rock sorting, getting to know their rock and having them hide it behind their back in a circle and keep passing it until they get their rock back. So they start to do the textual thing, and then you can tie into like relationship with Indigenous perspectives of this rock as a person. And then you can do like rock sorting, like science, like putting them into categories and giving them a 2-minute timer and then mix them up again and having them do it again. And then you can start getting into like sort of, you know, rock types or sort of landscape evolution. All right, sorry, I digress. I love rocks. Rocks is my thing. Okay. Oh, Melissa, how do you manage learners who have a strong desire to know the answer when you asked all the critical inquiry questions? Do you ever tell them the answers for ID questions, for example, or do you put it on them to sort of figure it out? How do you balance that?
Well, that's a tricky one, Megan. I get a lot of questions in the forest about what is this, you know, a lot of the ID stuff, because it's all so new to our learners. They've walked past this forest every single day of their lives, but they've never necessarily looked and said, actually don't know what type of tree that is. I'm not quick to answer. I'm very much, I love the whole art of questioning from, oh goodness, I'm losing his name, but you know, starting with really basic questions that are the confidence builder. So tell me what shape is the leaf? How many, talk about the growth pattern, and then we can scaffold it from there. And then I would hand out a field guide, but if they don't know it from that, that just means we need to get some more books from the library. I actually find it's the adults that want the answers more than the students. The students I find are a bit more like, okay, like I played with it and I'll keep dabbling at it. But I have a lot of teachers that just want to know the answer right away. But I think that's a lot of that will help them feel more comfortable and confident when they're outside if they knew the answer. So, you know, I get a bit of both.
I'm going to ask one more. And also, I think field guides. I love to say to kids that I don't know the answer. Let's have a look. That can be really helpful. And I have also had some of my best things where I don't know the answer. And it's just like they just love when you come down off that pedestal and become on the learning journey with them. And then there's this love and mutual respect of like, yeah, I don't, just because I'm an adult doesn't mean I have all the answers all the time. I think it can be really good for their social emotional. Someone's asked about like curricular connections to literacy, math, science. And of course, like teaching in different provinces or any of these things, but every single one of the things you talked about, for me, I've looked at all of the Canadian ones. I'm doing stuff for the US at the moment. It all ties in. There are so many ways to do that. And again, if you get the kit, there's all these sparks that will absolutely take you there. I'm going to respect, we've been on for another 20 minutes, everyone's time. And I just want to say thank you so much. What an incredible presentation, so much information, so much knowledge and passion. And we're very grateful to you for being here. Both of you, Lauren and Megan. Again, in the follow-up email, we'll have links to their websites, Room to Play Consulting, to Lauren's book as well, and the work you do with your podcast, Nature Mentoring. And so thank you so much for being here. And I'll say good night, Gesig Squiet, and Gesig Gesmiet even. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.